The greatest defeats in your life didn't come with an explosion. They came with a whisper, a half-second reflex, a line you said too fast. That's not what I meant. It always starts the same. Someone questions you in public, not with facts, with tone, with sarcasm, with an edge. They say, "Oh, come on, it's just a joke." Or, "I guess someone thinks they're smarter than the rest of us." Or worse, "She didn't mean anything by it. She just likes the spotlight." And without thinking, you step in, you start defending, you try to clean it up, you explain, you clarify, you apologize. That's when it happens. Not out loud, not visibly, but deep in the eyes of everyone watching. You lost. You didn't get beaten. You handed them the sword. Because when you say, "I'm not what you think," what they hear is, "Please believe me." And that's surrender. Machiavelli didn't need a battlefield to see this. He understood it in courtrooms, in council chambers, in whispers behind closed doors. He knew the instant you feel the need to explain yourself, you've already accepted the premise that someone else has the right to question you. And in power, that's suicide. You've been there, misunderstood, cornered, and the first thing you did, you explained. But it didn't fix anything. In fact, it made it worse. They leaned back while you leaned forward. They stayed calm while you got emotional. And by the time you were done talking, you knew. You gave them everything. The more you explain, the less they respect you. Not because of what you said, but because you said anything at all. In the game of perception, there's only one rule that matters. Don't flinch first. Because the man who explains always looks smaller than the man who just watches. And that's exactly what you didn't do. You talked, you reached, you reacted, and they watched you fold from across the table. You didn't get attacked. You exposed yourself. The world didn't see a victim. They saw blood. Defending yourself feels noble. It feels honest. It feels necessary, but only to the weak, to the powerful. It's submission. Because when you defend yourself, you're not just answering a question. You're agreeing that the question deserved an answer. You're saying, yes, your judgment matters. Yes, your perception has power over me. Yes, I care what you think. You've stepped onto their field. You're playing their game. And the moment you do that, you've already lost. Because the man who tries to explain is not believed. He's evaluated and judged and picked apart. You're not fixing anything. You're feeding the fire. Explaining is like standing in a courtroom where the judge already decided the verdict. And the jury, they're watching your face, not your words. You think clarity brings peace? It doesn't. It brings exposure, and the exposed man bleeds first. People say, "I just want to be understood." But that desire doesn't come from strength. It comes from emotional hunger, from insecurity, from the need to be validated by people who've already decided who you are. But Machiavelli didn't chase understanding. He chased control, because control doesn't come from being seen. It comes from being unreadable. There's no power in being fully known. Only vulnerability. Only leverage you gave away. You want control. Stop talking. Let them guess. Let them wonder what you're really thinking. Let them overestimate you. That's how aura is built. You've been in this position before, explaining yourself, clarifying, trying to undo the damage with words. And the more you talked, the less you were heard. Because in that moment, you weren't commanding anything. You were begging, and the room could feel it. You weren't leading the conversation. You were chasing it. You were leaking your power, sentence by sentence. The most powerful people don't win arguments. They end them before they begin. Not with logic, not with evidence, but with presence, a stillness that says, I know who I am, and I don't need your confirmation. You ever met someone like that? They didn't speak much, but when they did, everyone listened. Not because their words were perfect, but because they never spoke, unless they chose to. That's the power you gave up. The second you tried to explain yourself, you don't win by defending. You win by reflecting, not the truth, but the weakness of the attacker. They throw a jab, something subtle, just loud enough for the room to hear. A joke wrapped in venom, a compliment dipped in poison. Everyone watches you. They expect tension, a comeback, a reaction, but you give them nothing. No words, no smirk, no shift in your eyes. You sit still and let the insult hang in the air like a stale smell. You don't clean it. You let the room inhale it, and the moment stretches. Too long, too uncomfortable, too silent. Now it's not about you anymore. It's about them. Why did they say that? What are they trying to prove? Are they bitter, jealous, unstable? You've said nothing, but you've turned the spotlight. They wanted to put you on trial. Now they're the one being examined. That's the mirror. It doesn't fight. It reflects, and no one's ready to see what they really look like. You ever been in a room where someone said something passive-aggressive, and the target just stared back, unblinking? You could feel the room shift, the power transfer, the weight settle on the one who spoke. Because silence isn't passive, it's confrontational. It says, you exposed yourself, and I'm letting the world look at you. That's presence. That's power. Someone says, you always act like you're better than us. And instead of saying, no, I don't, you just pause, look at them, and tilt your head slightly, as if to say, that's your projection, not my reality. It burns them, because now they're not facing resistance. They're facing emptiness, and emptiness reflects whatever they carry inside. If they're insecure, they see rejection. If they're bitter, they see superiority. If they're fragile, they see threat. And none of that came from you. You just held the mirror. This is the difference between the average person and the Machiavellian operator. The average person hears the accusation and rushes to correct it. They want peace. They want fairness. They want to be seen as good. But the Machiavellian doesn't chase image. He controls interpretation. And interpretation isn't built with words. It's built with silence, stillness, wait. You've done this before, maybe without knowing it. Someone accused you. You didn't reply. And they started unraveling. Their voice got higher. Their logic got shaky. They needed the fight, and you didn't give it to them. So they fought themselves. They talked too much. They said things they shouldn't. They looked around for support and found none. And you just breathed and watched. That's the mirror at work. It doesn't destroy the enemy. It lets them destroy themselves. In the reflection of their own projection, there's a level beyond silence. It's not Kia. It's absence, not avoidance. Elimination. You don't defend. You don't respond. You don't react. You vanish. Not blocked. Not ghosted. Not seen. You become the shadow that no longer reflects light. And that absence, it shakes people in ways noise never could. Someone attacks you, publicly, emotionally, strategically. They want a reaction. They feed off it. Even hate is nourishment to them, because it proves they still matter. But you give them nothing. They write a long message. You don't open it. They post about you. You don't comment. They speak your name. You don't say it back. You're not being passive. You're not being scared. You're declaring you are not worth a reply. And the human ego, It cannot survive irrelevance. Most people can tolerate being hated, but being ignored, that's starvation. You've seen it. They start spinning, posting more, talking more, tagging you indirectly, trying to bait a response, trying to spark just one flicker of recognition, but you're not there. You're not playing. You're not in the arena. You're above it. And the higher you rise, the more frantic they become, because now, it's not just about what they said. It's about the silence swallowing them whole. They fall into their own noise. They become obsessed. They look unstable, and everyone sees it. You didn't say a word, but the world watched them unravel. Because here's the secret. The longer they talk, and you don't, the more the room shifts. What's wrong with him? Why won't he let it go? Why is he still talking about someone who isn't even responding? Their obsession becomes the evidence, not against you, against themselves. You ever had someone argue with you online, while you said nothing, and by the end, they were debating ghosts? They looked crazy, unbalanced, exposed. That's what happens when you weaponize absence. Machiavelli would call this the invisible blade. You don't swing it. You don't threaten with it. You simply vanish. And let them cut themselves trying to find you. Because disappearing isn't escape. It's dominance. It says, I'm not hiding. I've just moved to a level you can't reach. Let them rage. Let them reach. Let them drown in the echo of their own voice. You're not punishing them. You're letting nature take its course. Some fires die when ignored. Others burn themselves out from lack of air. And you're the one who didn't even need to blow. That's the disappearance strategy. Not silence. Absence. Not reaction. Evaporation. And to those watching, that kind of distance doesn't read as weakness. It reads as power. Unreachable. Unbothered. Unshakable. You didn't win by proving anything. You won by being impossible to reach. And that's Machiavellian perfection. There's a kind of power. You don't need to speak to carry the pulve. It enters the room before you do. It speaks louder than any defense. It's called aura. Aura doesn't ask for respect. It creates caution. It's the energy that makes people rethink their words before they say them to you. It's built in restraint, in the calm that doesn't crack, in the silence that feels heavier than noise. You don't need to argue. You don't need to explain. You don't even need to respond. You just need to be unshakable. You walk into a room. Someone makes a sly remark. Something about your past, your ambition, your silence. Everyone watches, waiting, expecting. You don't blink. You don't smirk. You don't even look their way. You sit still, unbothered, neutral. Now it's not about what they said. It's about your lack of reaction. The spotlight turns, and they start sweating under it. They explain the joke. They clarify their tone. They look around for backup and find none. Because you didn't defend yourself. You didn't resist. You simply existed with weight. And that weight shifted the room. That's aura. Aura isn't built through attention. It's built through discipline, through the refusal to give energy to the unworthy, through the art of knowing. You don't owe anyone a performance. Think of the people who hold power quietly. The ones who speak little, but never have to repeat themselves. The ones who don't flinch when insulted, who don't rush to clarify, who don't chase reputation, because their silence says everything. Machiavelli understood this. Power isn't just what you say, it's what people believe you could say, but choose not to. When you stay still, you let the other side fill in the blanks, and the mind fills them with fear, with stories, with myths. He must know something. He must be planning something. He must be too secure to care. And that fear, that projection, becomes armor. Aura is what happens when your presence is sharper than your defense. When your stillness is more threatening than their aggression. You think you need to speak. You don't. You need to become the kind of man they can't read, can't predict, can't provoke. The unpredictable isn't chaotic. It's dangerous. Because it holds the power to break patterns without saying a word. You don't need to convince. You need to command, not with volume, but with gravity. So next time you're challenged, don't perform, don't explain, don't twitch. Sit back, scan the room, say less. Let your silence turn their confidence into doubt. Let your posture force them to reconsider. Let your aura speak in a language they can't imitate. Because in a world addicted to attention, the one who doesn't need it terrifies everyone. Most people defend by denying. They say, I'm not like that. I didn't mean it that way. I swear, that's not who I am. But Machiavellian strategy doesn't deny, it redirects. It flips the attack back on the attacker. Someone calls you arrogant. You don't say, no, I'm just confident. You say, interesting how confidence makes people uncomfortable. Now, they're on defense. Not you. They expected resistance. Instead, they got a mirror. And in that mirror, they don't like what they see. They look insecure. Bitter. Triggers. You ever see someone lash out and then immediately try to walk it back? You stayed calm. They lost control. Now they're performing damage control while you say nothing. That's reversal. You didn't argue. You exposed. Because true control is not defending your frame, it's owning theirs. Someone says, you're fake. You respond. Everyone says that when they stop getting what they want. Someone says, you're manipulative. You say, only people who can't be influenced say that. H-line slices clean. No defense. No explanation. Just sharp precision. And then, silence. Let them fill it. Let them spin. Let them scramble to explain themselves. You didn't break them. You let them step into their own trap. You don't push. You pull. And the weight of their own emotion does the rest. The more they talk, the weaker they look. Because now, they're the one clarifying, justifying, explaining. And you already said your line and stopped. In front of a crowd, that's devastating. The audience doesn't remember what you said. They remember how calm you were, how sharp, how final. Reversal doesn't just flip the accusation. It reclaims the room. It resets the power. Instead of defending your image, you rewrite theirs. You reveal that the insult they threw says more about them than it ever could about you. You don't need a sword. You let them swing, then fall forward into the space you left behind. Machiavelli would call this the invisible pivot. You never blocked. You never struck. You just shifted, and they collapsed under the weight of their own intention. The best part, they know it. They feel it. But they can't undo it. Because once the room sees them as the one who overreacted, who got emotional, who lost control, that image sticks, and your silence becomes legend. You didn't win with force. You won with restraint. You didn't dominate them. You let them defeat themselves. That's the art of reversal. Not power through aggression, but power through calm, through timing, through presence. The man who reverses doesn't explain. He simply lets the attack turn inward, and when it does, he never has to lift a finger again. The man who doesn't defend himself doesn't disappear. He ascends, and those below, they start to panic. They start to spiral, because they were counting on a reaction. That's what gave them meaning. Without it, they're just screaming into an empty room. You've seen it before. Someone calls you out, and you say nothing. They double down. They post again. They talk again. They try harder. But now, it's not strategy. It's compulsion. They're chasing ghosts. They're shadowboxing. And every swing lands on themselves. They thought you were the fire, but you were the mirror. And now they can't stand what's being reflected back at them. They accuse again. They raise their voice. They bring your name into rooms you've never stepped into. And with each mention, they look smaller, because the crowd sees it too. At first, they watched for your reply. Then they started watching your silence. Now, they're watching the attacker fall apart. He's still talking, still posting, still trying to get the last word, in a conversation you never joined. And you're still, composed, far above the noise. You don't fight. You let the collapse play out. You let them dig their own hole, deeper and deeper, until even their allies begin to shift away. Why does he keep bringing this up? Why does he care so much? Didn't the other guy already move on? That's when the collapse becomes public. And that's when your silence becomes louder than their campaign. Because here's what Machiavelli understood. Desperation reveals more than strategy ever will. And obsession, it always turns on itself. You didn't shame them. You didn't expose them. You simply didn't feed them. And now, they've overplayed, overreached, overtalked. The crowd doesn't need evidence. They need contrast. And you gave it to them through restraint. Every time they lost control, you gained more. Every word they added made yours feel heavier because you said nothing and they said too much. Eventually, they become the cautionary tale, the one who couldn't let go, the one who wanted a war and ended up punching air. You think this happens by chance? No, it's a structure, a discipline, a choice to not play their game and instead let them lose it alone. That's the collapse game. You don't destroy them. You give them the stage and watch them self-destruct in the spotlight, because nothing feels more pathetic than someone trying to attack a man who refuses to descend. You became untouchable, not by hiding, but by rising. You never defended, and yet they lost the battle, not to you, to their own obsession with you. That's the final twist. They tried to ruin your name, but you didn't defend it. And in doing nothing, you turned your silence into something they could never control again. You don't need to defend your name. You need to become the kind of man whose name doesn't need defending. You don't need to fix what they say about you. You need to rise so far above it that no one dares repeat it. That's aura, not charm, not explanation, not PR, just presence. The kind that turns accusation into background noise, the kind that makes people careful with your name, the kind that ends conversations without saying a word. You don't chase clarity. You build myth, and myth is built in silence. It's what people imagine when you say nothing. It's what they assume you could say, but don't, because silence is not absence. It's control. It's awareness. It's emotional sovereignty. When you don't defend yourself, you make space for others to do it for you. The crowd speaks up. The room shifts. The energy tilts in your favor because they saw you stay still. While someone else unraveled, they say, he didn't even respond. He didn't deserve that. Why are they still coming after him? And now you're not just respected, you're protected. Without lifting a finger, that's Machiavellian leverage. The ability to shift the battlefield without ever stepping onto it. Your stillness speaks. Your silence commands. Your refusal to defend becomes the armor no attack can pierce. The world told you that silence is guilt. That to be misunderstood is to be weak. That if you don't explain, You'll be judged. But Machiavelli would laugh, because the man who explains invite jugement, and the man who says nothing becomes a question too dangerous to answer. Eventually, you reach a point where you don't even need to decide who you are. They do it for you. They project, they argue, they interpret your silence, as strategy, as threat, as strength. And that's the moment you've won. Because now, you're not a man in the room. You're a presence that bends the conversation without saying a word, a presence that ends drama before it begins, a presence that doesn't play defense because it doesn't have to. You've stepped beyond the need to clarify, beyond the court of opinion, beyond their access to your emotions. Now, you don't explain your image. You define it, and people feel it. In your posture, in your pace, in the way your silence fills the air like weight. You're not arguing anymore. You're commanding. And when the room grows quiet, when the noise dies out, when the accusations fade, they'll remember one thing. You never defended yourself, and yet, no one dared to touch you again.